Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Personal Trainers Who Care podcast. I'm Victoria, and I'm a personal trainer at the Wellington location. So, a big part of what we do as personal trainers is help our clients out with nutrition since it's so important for health and for recovery. So, for National Nutrition Month, we're going to be sharing lots of information about nutrition, and that leads us into today's guest. So, we'll be chatting with Brittany Gordon, who's a holistic nutritionist. Hi, Brittany. So, could you tell me a little bit about your background and what led you into becoming a nutritionist?
It's like long-winded, it feels like when I go back and I look at it. I got into health and wellness as a personal trainer first, and then I became a yoga instructor, but all of it was kind of like slowly leading me back to going back to school for nutrition. I was someone that grew up with like skin health issues, digestive health issues, allergies, like the severe anaphylaxis form of them. So food or nutrition was always something that was a bit of a tug of war, I guess, for me growing up. So it felt like a natural step forward for me to go to school to learn about nutrition, even just for myself. But then as I got into it, I was realizing that it was really helpful for my personal training clients for me to be able to share this information, or even with my yoga students and stuff like that. And it won my heart over more so than the training and the yoga instruction. So that's kind of how I ended up as a nutritionist and in the holistic kind of realm of things. It was just nice to be able to like look at the whole person instead of just one aspect of it, which is what I had been doing ahead of that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think as a personal trainer, like it seems like majority of my clients need some sort of nutrition information. So it's definitely a very common entry into the nutrition world. There's a lot of information on the internet. So what would you say your approach to nutrition and dieting is?
When I meet people, I always like to joke. I think it's a funny joke. It's probably not a funny joke, but I always like to say that I think I'm very realistic with my approach to nutrition, which I think is funny. The joke is that anything out there, right? Like everything being pitched to us on social media and the internet and magazines and wherever you're getting your information is like these three easy steps, these three
Mm-hmm.
realistic steps. So for me, my approach is about figuring out what that individual needs and building them a program around what their needs, their life, their lifestyle, their goals, their health concerns are, instead of trying to like force feed them into this one category that maybe doesn't work for them. So it's not a specific diet that I adhere to or a specific set of rules or anything. It really is an individualized approach to each and every person that I work with.
Okay, yeah, I think that's super important. And then I guess that goes into my next question. So, do you think it's possible to lose weight without dieting or being restrictive?
So that's kind of my whole shtick. So I work firmly in the area of anti-diet culture. I'm not a nutritionist that puts clients on diets. We work on developing healthy habits that are sustainable and flexible so that they can move and build with that client as they grow, right? As they change, as they get into different seasons of life, as their kids get older, etc. So, what works for us in our 20s, right, is not going to work for us in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. So, figuring out what our body needs and what our lifestyle and habits look like is way more important to the whole fat loss scheme of things than going on a diet would be. So, at
Mhm.
the end of the day, I ask people, like if you're making changes to your nutrition, they have to be changes that you're comfortable accepting for the rest of your life. Like you're happy to do it for the rest of your life. If it's something that you're like, I can do this for 30 days, it's not worth your time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So fat loss is something that is sustainable. Yes, it is a sustainable and approachable without being restricted. I don't think anybody should feel restricted when it comes to their nutrition. Food is meant to be a form of joy and soothing and comfort. Like food is a good thing
Mhm.
in all shapes and forms. So yeah, I do think it's possible to achieve fat loss
Mhm.
without feeling restricted or feeling like you need to do some sort of diet.
A lot of people still struggle to find balance. Why do you find that so many people struggle with that?
So I think the struggle is that we don't know what balance is anymore, right? I think we are fed this idea of what like balance looks like in a hyper curated social media aesthetic. So we're seeing these people that are probably like naturally thin or naturally athletic and muscular, and then they're having their like eating a whole pizza and they're like, this is what my balance looks like. And we feel like, well, I should be able to do that. But we don't know what that person's life looks like. We don't know if they eat a pizza once a year or whatever, right? So, what balance looks like has become really skewed. And what we're striving towards isn't necessarily balance. A lot of the times when we're telling ourselves we're looking for balance, what we're doing is we're approaching it in like a modified restrictive dieting kind of capacity. And that isn't sustainable in the long run. So people are left feeling like they're failing at something when whatever it was set up to kind of fail from the beginning. So
Hmm.
for me, balance looks like an ebb and flow. So you cook most of your meals, but you still order in or go out for dinner with friends, or maybe you use a meal delivery service because you know that you're going to get like quality vegetables in, you're making sure you're eating whole grains, you're getting enough protein in throughout the day. And what that looks like is going to look different for everybody, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of the times we're told we all have the same 24 hours in the day. We don't. We don't all have the same 24 hours. There are 24 hours in a day, but how each of us needs to use those 24 hours looks wildly different for
Yeah,
everybody. So what your balance is going to look like is going to look super different from what my balance is going to
right.
look like. And maybe that means like meal prep for me, and for you it means like I don't know, cooking a new thing every single day because that's what works.
I
No,
think
no,
going
no.
back to what you were saying about how, yeah, what worked in your 20s is not always going to be the same thing that works in your 30s or 40s or once you have kids. Like you're going to have to change up how you're eating and change your expectations a little bit.
Yeah. And building in some of that like flexibility so that you can change, right? Without feeling like you're letting go of something or you're ruining your progress or you're failing at something. There are going to be really like spot on weeks where you feel like I am amazing. I made all my food from scratch. I ate all of the vegetables. I am a health goddess. And then there's going to be other weeks where you're just like I don't have it in me. I'm ordering in like
Hmm.
80% of the time, but I'm making choices that feel good to me, even if it isn't made from scratch.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people, I think, have this idea that like weight loss is very fast, especially due to like social media and magazine headlines and everything. So do you think that people have these unrealistic expectations?
So I don't know if it's an unrealistic expectation or if it's like a hope, right? Like we're sold this like lose 10 pounds in 10 days, which is like, I mean, that's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
And it's all water. Let's but so we're given this like microwave effect of things, right? Like we want it to be as fast as a microwave prepares our food for us. But the thing is the habits and the lifestyle and the food choices and the activity or the inactivity and the lack of sleep or the over consumption of sleep, the lack of like de-stressing, all of those things didn't just happen. Right. So sometimes when I'm working with clients, what we do is we work at building perspective at like, how long did it take us to get to a place where we were like, this doesn't work for me anymore. This is uncomfortable in my body. My digestive system's upset. My skin is upset, whatever. How long did it take to get to that point? Right. It didn't happen overnight. And the reverse of that, like getting to a place where we're energetic, we're sleeping well, we have time to de-stress, we're prioritizing our health and our wellness, our mental health and our physical health, is going to take the same amount of time, if
Hmm.
not more. right?
Yeah.
Because now we are rebuilding habits and redirecting old habits, and it's not easy,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of us feel like it's easy to get to a place where we don't want to be, but that wasn't easy either. We just don't have any like remembering of it. Like we don't have any
It
recollection
seems
of
like it almost
how it
happens
was.
overnight. It is like a long-term thing. And yeah, you gotta work backwards from that. So what would you say the strategies are that you recommend to people to help their relationship with food and finding balance in their lives?
So again, this is all going to be like really specific to the individual, but for everybody, like painting with a broad brush here, the smaller the step, the better is what I typically say. So if you feel like you're like, well, that feels stupid or that feels so silly, like it feels too easy, that's where you should be starting, right? So if like drinking enough water in a day feels like the silliest nutrition thing that you can add to your life, but you could probably commit to it 90% of the time, then we're starting with just drinking water. The other thing that I really encourage people to do is to do like an actual like audit, whatever you want to call it, an audit of like where you're at. Like, how many servings of vegetables do you actually eat in a day? How much protein are you actually consuming? How much sleep are you actually getting? Movement, etc. Like a realistic picture of what that looks like. There's no gold stars or shame in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could be having two servings of vegetables a day and two servings of protein and not enough sleep and no movement. That's where we're starting. Right? We can't go from two servings of vegetables a day to 6 to 8 servings of vegetables a day. It's just not going to pan out for us. We
Mm-hmm.
need to make it like small, measurable changes because our brain likes a reward system.
Right.
So when you eat two servings of vegetables consistently every day, that feels really good. And it's easier to do than three servings of vegetables every single day. And then when we consistently do that, we feel like we won again. So it's easier to want to add to that momentum. So it's kind of like with personal training, right? You lift a heavy thing, and then the next week you lift a heavier thing, and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting so strong.
And I think that really shows the personalization of nutrition because, yeah, like laying out exactly where you're at, it's going to be very different person to person. And one person may need to focus on something else as a priority.
Mhm. And that like that personalized piece is and so I work primarily with people with like female hormones, right? So estrogen, progesterone fluctuations. And that individualized piece becomes even more important when we factor in our hormonal health and like what stage of hormonal health we're in. Are we in peak like hormone years, so peak fertility years? Are we in perimenopause? Are we in menopause? The approach nutritionally is going to be different in each of these. And then we have like prenatal and postnatal in there too, right? So, but what our bodies need is going to look different in those
Mm-hmm.
stages too. Yeah.
Yeah, with all the online information, it's easy to just get some generalized nutrition information, but I think it is important to really like sit down with either an expert or just find information that pertains to you about your body and where you're at and not
Mhm.
try to base it off of what you've seen online.
Well,
Um,
unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that you see online is based on men ages
yeah.
18 to 45, which is completely unhelpful to anyone that isn't that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have like monthly hormonal fluctuations instead of a 24-hour hormonal clock, then yeah, the advice out there isn't going to work for you, or it's going to, but not the way you're seeing it happen online.
So we're going to go on to some specific situations and kind of get some expert advice on that. So what kind of advice would you give to someone who struggles with stress eating?
I mean, do it. I think a lot of the times people ask me stuff about like stress eating or emotional eating or like those types of events or moments. They expect me to like give them tools to like resist it. The thing is that a lot of the times when we are emotionally eating or binge eating later on at night or eating because we are stressed, we're doing it for self-soothing.
Mm-hmm.
Self-soothing is something that we learn as infants, and then we continue to learn learn and stack onto that as we get older. It's an important part of mental health and mental development. So, stress eating and emotional eating becomes problematic when we're doing it to disassociate from what's going on. Okay. But if we find ourselves eating to manage our stress in that moment, we're going to do it in that moment. And then it's about backtracking later on and figuring out like what caused the stress, what let it get to be that intense, and what types of things can I implement in my life so my stress doesn't get to that point again.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I normally recommend is like 2 minutes. 2 minutes a day is what you need to give yourself. If you're like, honey, I have 3 kids, like that's never going to happen 2 minutes, 30 seconds, right? Like taking 3 deep breaths before you eat a food or before you have a meal is going to change how you eat that food, how you taste that food, how you have that meal. And 3 deep breaths is all of like 15 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
right? So little things like that can help us kind of manage it. So when people come back to me with this, I always say that the stress we put on ourselves because of the food we ate is going to harm us more than the food that we ate ever possibly could. Okay. So even if it's like chronic stress eating, right? Then it's like, okay, we got to pump the brakes at a certain point and look back and be like, what are my triggers? What is causing this? And what types of things can I add into my life to better support me?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what it's about.
Yeah. Like if it becomes a very big issue in your life, maybe there's other things that come into play and that you should work on finding a solution for those. But yeah, in the moment, not trying to cause additional stress. Like you said, it's almost like a natural self-soothing.
It is. Well, and the thing is, like, if you're stress eating and you like want cookies, if you're like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not having cookies, I'm healthy, quote unquote, now, I'm going to have, I don't know, celery and peanut butter. You'll eat your celery and peanut butter, and then you are going to continue eating
Yeah.
until you give yourself the cookie. So
Yeah.
just have the cookie,
Yeah.
right? If the cookie feels like, that feels really bad to me, like it just doesn't feel good in my body to just have that. Think of what can I add to this cookie to make it feel better. So maybe that's like some yogurt because it's rich in protein and healthy fats, or you're going to add some nuts and seeds to it so it feels a little bit more robust. Like do that type of stuff instead of restricting and avoiding instead.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of approaching it is always, yeah, think about what you can add to a meal to make it more balanced or to a snack to make it more balanced so that you don't feel restricted and you can still have the cookie and not feel terrible. So, what advice would you give someone who's going on vacation or during the holidays and they tend to eat a little bit more while they're on vacation or at their friends and family's place? What would you say to someone like that?
Eat the cake, have it, enjoy it. I get this question a lot actually about like worrying about like ruining progress or overdoing it or whatever when you're on holiday or it is the holidays. And a lot of the times I say, don't worry about it. Just eat the cake, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
are on holiday to have a good time. We are having holidays to celebrate and be with people and to socialize. When we bring restriction into it, we bring stress into it. And again, that stress is going to be more detrimental to your body than any of the possible overeating or alcohol consumption or anything could possibly be to your system.
Right.
Okay. So just allowing yourself to have a good time, to de-stress, to like relax from that, it will be beneficial to you. Most people, when they go on vacation or on holiday, when they actually allow themselves to have a good time and de-stress, don't gain weight, don't ruin progress, don't ruin their gains. They come back in a better place because they are relaxed,
Yeah.
right? They've actually de-stressed and their body is ready to go and move forward.
I've definitely
Um,
seen that with my clients. So it's like they take a week off, they come back, and sometimes they've lost weight. Maybe they gained a few pounds, but even then, like they're lifting more. They seem just more energized. So yeah, take that time, enjoy it for yourselves. Okay. And then what about someone who's super busy? So you're a new mom, you're super busy now. What would you say are some practical tips that you'd give to trying to stay balanced?
So it's whatever works. So for a really long time, and I feel like still a little bit nowadays, I like my social media is so curated in the anti-diet culture world of things. I'm like, I don't know what other people are messages people are getting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But for a really long time, it was like fresh is best, right? Like you can't do canned things, you can't do frozen things. Like this is all horrible. It's just not true,
Mm-hmm.
right? So some nutritional properties are like denatured during the canning process, but the frozen stuff is probably more nutritionally dense than the fresh stuff on the shelf at the grocery store. So having frozen veg and fruit and like single serve chicken breasts or fish fillets and stuff like that is going to probably be faster and easier to throw together, throw it on a sheet pan, pop it in the oven, and now I have a meal in 10 minutes instead of like having to cut up my broccoli and wash my broccoli and prep my fish and debone it and like all the things that go into making a meal. So figure out what your convenience items are. Okay, so
Right.
that would be like first and foremost. Rely on things like the rotisserie chicken at the grocery store. It's the same as you making the chicken in your own oven. Maybe it's not the same seasonings that you would use, but take the skin off then if that's how you feel about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that, like that, it cheaper a lot of the times buying the rotisserie chicken at the grocery store than it is buying a whole chicken and cooking it yourself. It's done for you. You add a bagged salad or a pre-made vegetable medley or something like that to it, and you have a good, well-rounded meal. You have something with carbs, you have something with protein, and something with fat in it, and it was done. So my thing is relying on convenience items. It's not a bad thing. You're not losing, and you're not like I don't know, screwing up doing that,
Yeah.
right? A lot of us have this feeling that if we're not making it from scratch, then we're not being healthy. And that's just not true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. Now we're just going to go over some common myths since there's many about nutrition. Okay. So, is gluten bad for you?
I mean, if you're allergic to it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you are a celiac, it is very bad for you. You have an autoimmune condition, don't eat it. Some people are sensitive to gluten, 100%. For all the people that are like, yeah, but I cut gluten out and I felt so much better, that has a lot more to do with the foods that you end up having to eat instead of the things that you were relying on before than it does that you don't eat gluten anymore. So for a lot of people that cut gluten out, they're not having like crackers as a snack anymore. Now they have to have like a vegetable as
Mm-hmm.
a snack now. So yeah, you're eating more veg, you're gonna feel better. Okay. So no, gluten is not bad for you. It is protein. For some people it is. For most people it is not.
And are low fat or fat free products healthier than the full fat products?
No, diet culture in the like 70s to 90s would say yes. They are just different then. So low fat and fat free, I always think like it makes me laugh a little bit, especially when it's like dairy, right? Like dairy is fat.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. It's fat, protein, and sugars. That's what dairy is. And so when we're doing like a low fat or a fat free, it means that the fat content in it is lower, but now the balance of sugars, so lactose, right, in it is higher now. So we're getting more sugar, less fat. Is that better? No, not necessarily. If we are adhering to a specific calorie program for whatever reason, then going low fat or fat free might help you feel less restricted and feel like you have more variety in your diet. Some people like the flavors and textures of things like low fat yogurt or whatever, as opposed to the full fat stuff. And if you prefer, like you actually prefer the flavor of it, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But no, it's not better for you. It's not a healthier choice.
Would you say that the full fat products actually tend to make you feel more satiated?
That is like it got such a bad rap for so long. And now
Hmm.
because of certain like fad diets and stuff like that, it's really having like its day in the sun, right? People are starting to see like, oh, fat's not bad for you. And
Hmm.
it's delicious. Fat is so tasty. It's one of the main components in our meals that help us feel satisfied by
Yeah.
the foods that we consumed. So I always say like it's the difference between a salad that's just vegetables with like lemon juice as a dressing or a salad that has avocado and oil-based dressing in it. One of them is way more
Yeah.
satisfying, right? So yeah, it helps us stay full longer. It helps us feel full longer. If you are someone that is working on your hormonal health, it's going to help with hormonal balance, hormone production. If you're someone that suffers from seasonal affective disorder, so SAD, in the winter time, it's going to help with that because it helps with dopamine and serotonin production, right? So fat is important. And when we start cutting it out, we have to think like, well, what's the trade-off?
Yeah. I'm glad that, yeah, people are starting to realize the importance of fat because, yeah, it was like a huge trend a few
Yeah.
years ago to just completely cut it out from your diet, which is never healthy.
No.
Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is menopause. So, yeah, a lot of my clients enter into menopause and then they think, like, okay, this is the weight I'm at and I'm never going to be able to lose weight. Is that true?
No, it's just so I said earlier, right? Like whether you're in your peak hormonal years or perimenopause or menopause, like what your nutritional approach is needs to be different. What your like physical fitness approach is going to look different, right? Like so it needs to change, right? So if we're trying to do the exact same things that we were doing in our 40s before we hit menopause, well then we have to stop and think like something needs to change, right?
Hmm.
So I actually like I have a program, it's called Fat Loss Without Calorie Counting, and I go through all of the different hormonal phases and I go through the different like things that people need to focus on as they change from one moment in time to another moment in time. For most of my female clients, and that's who menopause affects, it's protein is what ends up coming in, right? Most female clients are just not consuming enough protein. You
Hmm.
are like drastically under consuming it. So it's the goal is to get like 25 grams of protein a meal and 10 to 15 grams of protein a snack
Yeah.
in a day, and that's like the bare minimum, and that's a generic number. Obviously if you're like a smaller in stature, if you're like 5'1", it's going to be a different number. If you're 6 feet tall, it's going to be a different number, but that's the base minimum that we want people to be trying to get in. As we get closer and closer to menopause, or we are in menopause, that number, like that protein intake, becomes more and more important. And then how carbohydrates, what types of carbohydrates and how they affect us and our blood sugar levels is going to be different in menopause than it was even in perimenopause.
Hmm.
So figuring out what works for you and what doesn't work for you is going to be the game changer, right? But there
Yeah.
is going to be shift that needs to happen. That said, it is 100% possible to lose fat. I like to like always focus in. I like to say fat instead of weight
Right.
because if you're training, right? If you're lifting weights and being physically active, it is very possible that your weight is not going to fluctuate, but you're going to lose inches and get stronger and see more definition in your muscle. And that's really what we want,
Hmm.
right? Especially in menopause, the goal is to maintain and build muscle.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily just to lose generic weight. Lose fat mass, fine, but it's about maintaining muscle mass
Hmm.
is what the game really is.
Going back to the protein, could you explain in simple terms why it is that like women after menopause need more protein?
For women, we really get the short end of the stick
Yeah.
on this one. So once we hit perimenopause, so normally it's like mid 40s, early 40s onwards. Perimenopause happens about like a decade, 5 to 10 years before menopause hits for most women. And at that point, we start having the ability, let's call it, the ability to lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass every year. And that is gigantic.
Yeah.
Okay. Once we hit menopause, that number solidly sits around 8% potential muscle mass reduction. And the goal is always to stay upright, like to stay straight longer in life, right? So to avoid that like curling of our spine, that loss of muscle mass,
Yeah.
when we don't consume enough protein, our body doesn't have the building blocks that it requires to maintain muscle mass, let alone build muscle mass.
Yeah.
Okay. Muscle is super, super metabolically active. And if we're only ever focused on restricting calories, we're not thinking of are we maintaining the things that we want to maintain? We're thinking of like, I need to be smaller,
Hmm.
right? And smaller isn't going to keep us erect for a longer period of time. It's
Yeah.
going to turn us into candy canes a lot
Yeah.
faster. And when our body doesn't have enough calories coming in, it needs to make decisions. Like, do we keep making like logical functioning decisions and driving cars and going to the gym like she wants? Or do we continue to build and maintain this muscle mass that's also kind of asking for stuff? Well, no, if we don't have enough calories coming in, we're not maintaining muscle mass.
Hmm.
We're going to let that go. Okay. Which shoots us in the foot as we get older. So, focusing on lifting heavy things or doing any type of body weight resistance training, plus making sure that we're getting enough of our amino acids or our protein in the day to like solidify the work that we're doing in our resistance training is what's going to help us age better, more gracefully, more
Right.
healthfully.
And be able to do the
Uh,
things that we want to do.
yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
that answers the question.
Yeah. No, definitely. Okay. We'll go on to the next question. So, does eating sugar give you diabetes?
This is a loaded question. Like in excess, it can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does eating like a birthday cake on your birthday and candy at Halloween and right? Like sweets during the holidays, is that going to give you diabetes? Probably not. No. But then it's like, are you genetically predisposed to it? Did you have gestational diabetes during your pregnancy and you let your blood sugars go unchecked? Like, there's a whole bunch of factors that go into it. But no, sugar doesn't just like cause diabetes like that. Like, it isn't this, I had a piece of candy and now I have type 2 diabetes. It's a long-term thing. It's an over like consumption of that normally leads to type 2 diabetes, which used to be called adult onset diabetes because it was only seen in adult bodies before. Now that's not the case.
Hmm.
But yeah, it comes to unchecked blood sugar levels. So if we're letting ourselves spike up really high and then crash down low and then spike up really high and then crash down low, and then we kind of live in those peaks and valleys that like that's our lives. We're like super energetic and then we need a coffee and then we're super energetic and then we need a nap. If we live in that kind of realm, you are definitely on the trajectory towards type 2 diabetes. If you live more in this, like, I kind of just have like energy throughout the day. Yeah, I have like high energy points, but I never really feel like I'm crashing down. I always think of it as a lazy river instead of
Hmm.
peaks and valleys. If you're in that type of blood sugar regulation throughout the day, then no, the sugar like isn't leading you towards diabetes.
Right. And yeah, it's not the sugar necessarily itself, but it's making sure that you're eating a balanced diet. So when you are eating carbohydrates, that you're balancing them out with your fats and your protein as well, right?
Yeah, well, but even like just eating carbohydrates on their own, right? Like if you're eating an apple, then
Hmm.
your apple is coming with fiber and
Fiber,
water
yeah.
and stuff that's going to help slow the release of sugar. The same with like whole grains, right? Like having a bowl of steel cut oatmeal is coming with a bunch of like fiber and bran and like all this stuff that slows down the release of sugar. So it's not this crazy hit. It's not like eating a bag of Sour Patch Kids, right?
Hmm.
Like that's just sugar coming in delicious. I'm not here to like poop on Sour Patch Kids, love them, but they do two different things in our body, the way our body reacts to it and the way our body has to pump out insulin to appropriately use the sugar that's being delivered for our
Right.
system.
Okay. Does eating before bed make you fat?
No, I like this question. You mentioned me earlier, and I was like, this goes back to the whole like, you're not allowed eating after 6 o'clock or
Yeah.
seven
It's a
o'clock or
very
whatever that.
common myth that I
Yeah.
hear.
So no, is it gonna disrupt your sleep? Probably. Is lack of appropriate sleep over time going to make your body maintain weight that maybe you don't want to be maintaining? Also, probably. But it's not because you were eating before bed, it's because your sleep is disrupted now.
Hmm.
Okay. So, ideally, you're giving yourself a couple of hours before going to bed. That's when you have your last like meal or snack of the day. But no, if you have to eat and then go to bed right away, then you had to eat and go to bed right away. If we can make it so most of the time we're giving ourselves a couple hours in between our last snack of the evening and bedtime, then your sleep is just going to thank you for that,
Hmm.
right? You're going to get deeper sleep. You're going to have more sustainable sleep, less wake ups at night, less like sweating in the middle of the night. If you ever wake up like drenched in sweat, that is a blood sugar thing. Your body is trying to get rid of a bunch of energy in the middle of the night. That's not what your body wants to do. When we're sleeping, our body just wants to repair itself. It just
Hmm.
wants to recover from the day and get ready for tomorrow. But when we're eating right before bed, what we're doing is we're like, oh, and also, can you do this too? And your body's like, well, not really. Like, that's not what I'm paid for. Right. And we're like,
Right.
well, you just have extra work to do, no extra help.
Yeah.
Nobody likes.
I think that's great because, yeah, I think people get the idea that just like any calories you have before bed just automatically turn into fat as you're sleeping. So it's good to kind of like understand where that comes from and what that mechanism actually is. It's probably more from sleep. Is supplementation necessary for health?
No, it's not. A lot of us, again, it goes back to that, like, we want like instant results, right? Like, I went to the gym once, I had a salad once. Where is my six pack? Like, I should have lost 10 pounds already. It's been 3 days. That kind of like immediacy that we want in our our progress sort of thing. That's how supplementation became so popular. Supplementation can be super useful to the healthy lifestyle changes and dietary changes and relaxation and sleep changes that we're making, but it shouldn't be the place we start,
Hmm.
right? So if you're struggling to get enough actual like food-based protein into your diet, then maybe adding a protein shake, right, is the way to go. Adding some whey protein or some vegan protein powder to your like your life might be the way to go to get that protein in. Or if you are working really hard on your sleep but you're still really struggling, then maybe adding in a magnesium supplementation before bedtime is going to help get you into that more restful state. But the thing is, like, we have to work on the habit before we start adding these things in, because our body has to process all of everything what we put in it. So our food, our medication, our supplementation, everything, your liver and your kidneys have to deal with all of that. And if we're not making the necessary changes, we're creating traffic jams. So we're going to feel more sluggish. We're not going to sleep as well. Our stomachs are going to be worse than they were when we started, those type of things. So I say start with like food, movement, relaxation, and sleep. And then if you're feeling like things aren't progressing, then work with somebody that knows about supplementation before just spending your money.
Yeah.
Okay. There's so much stuff out there, and so many of the companies are really, really good at marketing, but there is no third party testing. They're using proprietary blends. It's like a big secret, right? You should know everything that's in your supplement. You should know how it's supposed to be stored before you're purchasing it. You should make sure there is third party testing on it. So it's not just the company being like, we are great, we believe so. And you know how it's going to work in your body. And knowing someone that works in nutrition or a naturopath or someone like that that actually works with supplements would be helpful
Right.
in selecting and spending money.
I mean, a big part of that is just like not wasting your money because, yeah, I think a
Yeah.
lot of people just end up buying all these supplements because they hear all these amazing benefits. But I mean, some supplements you'll just pee out, other ones don't work at all. So I think, yeah, talking to someone about it is probably the best.
Yeah.
Okay, last question here. So, is fat loss a simple equation of calories in versus calories out?
So, no, I think this one's really important. It kind of goes back to a lot of the stuff that we were talking about before. Like, can I lose fat in menopause? What does a realistic balance look like? All of those type of things. For many of us, we've done diets. right? Like we've been on a fad diet, we've done calorie counting, we've used MyFitnessPal, right? Like we've done the gambit of things. And although we are no longer doing those things, we bring pieces of them with us to our now, whatever our style of eating and nutrition and diet is. So we end up forming these ideas of what is quote unquote bad and quote unquote good. Food isn't bad or good, it just isn't. Okay. But one of the things that many of us have brought with us is like, well, I just got to eat less and move more. Like, I just got to do that. And it's not that simple. Okay. This calories in versus calories out equation came from the fact that we do need a calorie deficit for fat loss. But what that calorie deficit needs to look like is so vastly different between individuals. So if you and I were in the exact same calorie deficit, how our bodies would react to that would be so wildly different, right? Probably older than you. I'm postnatal. I don't think you're postnatal, right? Like, yeah. So like how it's going to affect our bodies and our energy and our sleep patterns and our ability to move our bodies and build our muscle mass and stuff like that is going to look so different. So just being in a calorie deficit and doing the math to what that should look like isn't going to be the thing that gets you there. The foods that we consume and the quality of the nutrients that we're taking in, so fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats, whole carbohydrates, those type of things, is going to get us to our fat loss goals, if that is a goal, way faster than just a math equation is ever going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because like calories from like a carrot aren't going to operate the same as calories from a chicken breast in our body. They do different things in our system.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would you say to the client who comes and they can't lose weight because they think that their body is like holding on to fat?
So it's very possible, right? That's one of those things that I call it like the yo-yo effect when I'm talking to people. Most of us have heard of like yo-yo dieting. We know what that looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going on, going off, going on, going off. But we don't realize what that's doing to our metabolism when we're going on a diet and then off a diet, and then on a diet and then off a diet. So when we go on a diet, we drastically cut our calories down, but our metabolism stays up, right? Like it's still in this healthy place. But our body is this super intelligent, super dumb thing all at the same time. So it's like, well, if I'm only getting in this much food, why am I burning my engine way up here?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll drop to match. So eventually it drops to match. While they're in different areas, though, we lose a ton of body mass, right? Normally, a lot of muscle mass, not necessarily a lot of fat mass in that instance, but we lose weight,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it feels like we are succeeding. Then our metabolism matches up with the calories that we are taking in, everything stalls out. Okay. So it's normally at this point that people are either like, whatever, I got to my goal weight, so I'm over it. I'm just going to go back to eating the way I used to eat
Yeah.
because I can't live this restrictive life anymore. Or we're like, well, I'm not quite there, so I got to double down. I either have to
Mm-hmm.
double down at the gym by my output, so I have to increase the calories that I'm expending, or I do that plus I cut back on the food that I'm consuming. So again, we create a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Every time we do that, your metabolism matches it. Your metabolism matches it.
Yeah.
Eventually we get to a point where we're not gaining in the gym the way we want to. We're not lifting the same. We're sore for a longer period of time after our workouts. Like it just doesn't feel good anymore. And we're like, why am I even doing it? So we get like the ethics, right?
Yeah.
Like, why even bother? And we go and we have our pizza and our poutine and our drinks and our all the things that we have been denying ourselves of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A lot of people say that like then I went off the rails, right? Or
Yeah.
I went like food spiral or something like that, right? But what that is your body being like, oh my God, finally she's having calories. So it cuts all the break wires. So you can't really say no to anything anymore because your body is like, finally food,
Yeah.
right? The famine is over. We're finally in a feast state. Eat, eat, eat. So what happens then is now we have way more calories, but our metabolism has just been beaten to nothing. Okay. So although our body takes no time at all to drop down for our metabolism to meet the amount of calories coming in, it is very skeptical about itself climbing back up to meet the calories coming in. So even when I'm working with people that are coming to me for fat loss, I always say, one, it's going to look like a lot more food than you think is safe to eat. And then two, there may be a period of weight gain or temporary plateau before any fat starts shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's because we have to like coax our metabolism out. We have to be like, it's safe. There's calories coming in now. You can do your job at full capacity. You don't have to be hiding back there anymore. It's okay. Okay. But every time we skip a meal again, or we're like, do I really need the avocado in my salad? I can probably save some calories there, right? Like we accidentally or on purpose restrict ourselves. What ends up happening is we end up beating that metabolism back down. So it's like, oh, I think it's safe. Oh, it wasn't safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, I think it's safe again. Oh, it wasn't safe. So it takes a while for it to work back up. That exchange does happen off. And that's why at the middle of this, I said we start with an audit of where we're at,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we got to figure out like what are we eating? How are we sleeping? What are we drinking? How are we moving? We'll start there. And from there, we can figure out what our body needs to actually start shifting our body composition.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that just shows the importance of strength training as well, because, yeah, building muscle is so necessary during a fat loss phase and just in general, just to make sure that we're not losing lean muscle mass, which will just damage our metabolism more. Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
doing both of those hand in hand is really important. All
Yeah.
right. So those are it for our myths. Thank you so much. Is there anything you wanted to plug?
No, I mean, I did mention earlier that I do have that fat loss without calorie counting program. I have a bunch of self-led programs up on my website. So if this is something that you're just like, oh, she said something about hormones, I have a self-led program for nutrition and hormonal introduction for female hormonal health, sorry. And then there is the fat loss without calorie counting program up there that gives you like week by week steps and like little homeworks on how to move forward and build something that'll be sustainable for you moving forward. They all work really well with like movement. If you're already in a movement regiment or you're working with a personal trainer like yourself, right? Like, so that type of stuff, they all work well with integrating into your lifestyle as opposed to being like, throw it all out and let's start from scratch. That's
Mm-hmm.
not how I work. So there are some self-led things if you are interested in figuring out what type of nutrition stuff might work for you and just
Okay, great.
dipping your toe in. Yeah.
Yeah. If someone wanted to follow you on your social media, do you have a Instagram handle you'd like to share?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at Healing Ginger, all one word, or you can check me out on my website at healingginger.ca.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed this and please give us a like and a follow.
Thank you.